Hello, everyone, and welcome to Making Revit Models Pretty. We have Martha Hollowell with us today, our Senior Instructional Designer from ASCENT. And Martha, I will pass the floor over to you.
Thanks, Corrine, and welcome to everyone. I was going to say good morning, but then it actually is now afternoon where I am. So wherever you are, welcome, and we're glad to have you here. Today's webcast, as Corrine said, is Making Revit Models Pretty. And we're going to focus on graphic display options in Autodesk Revit. So we're going to look at things like silhouettes and shadows, sketchy lines, the new depth queuing, and a few sun settings that will also help you present your model to the clients in a visual way that conveys the design intent that you want. And we're going to also look at some basic rendering techniques, kind of depending on how much time we have. So in this webcast, I want to, first of all, provide a refresher on creating perspective views, and then we're going to set up the graphic display options for views, and site and sun location, and then rendering. Now, I do want to mention that this content is from our Revit Architecture, Conceptual Design and Visualization class, chapters 3 and 4. And one of the things that I'm not covering everything in those two chapters, but I do want to let you know that we have made some changes to this training guide. So if you are using this, be aware, especially this section on graphic display options. I've made some changes. And I've also done quite a bit in the massing, which is an early part of the class, as well as some in rendering. So be aware, be on the lookout for some changes in this book if you're a trainer and you're using it. So first of all, I'm going to show a few slides, talk about a few things, then I'll switch over to Revit and then do some demonstrations. So first of all, remember to do perspectives. And there's a few things that you can do in perspectives that you used to not be able to do. And that includes things like you can pin and unpin. I forget exactly which one came in 2017, but you can do a line, move, and copy, cut or paste from the clipboard. So there's a number of things that can happen in perspective views that you do need to be aware of. So when you create it, you're going to be putting in your camera, as you can see right here, and a target. So that's how you set up the original view. And then you get your resulting perspective view, which may or may not be exactly what you're wanting, most likely not. So what you need to be doing is modifying your perspectives as well. And to do this, you can change the 3D view once you've done the camera. You can use your shift and middle mouse button to rotate around the view. Sometimes it'll get out of whack really quick, so just be aware of that. But then you can also change the field of view by modifying the shape handles, and you can see I have one of those pointed out right here. And of course, you can set up the visual styles to see what you want to see. The other thing that you can do when you are working with a perspective is in the plan view, you can move the camera, the target, there goes the camera, the target, and the far clip plane. And the far clip plane is how far into the distance that you actually see things. So in this example, if I had a tree, right about in here somewhere, you would see it, but if I had a tree out here, you wouldn't see it. Another thing that you can change in your perspective views is in the properties of the view. So here's our 3D view properties. And here's our clip plane, so there's the distance where it is, it's in the clip plane. And for right now, our important part is the elevation, so the eye and the target elevation. And you want to be able to make sure that you're seeing what you want to see. If you set the eye elevation and target elevation the same, it's as if you were looking straight as it. If you change one or the others, you might be up in a cherry picker looking down. So it really depends on the view that you want to do. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few of these things. There we go. This is a part of the practice for this section of the book. And I'm going to go ahead and switch on over to Revit. And I'm going to make a couple of the perspective views. So when you're doing an exterior perspective, one of the things that it can really help is to go a long way away. So I'm zooming out. Then I'm coming up here to my camera, right up here. And I'm just going to pick 2 points. So I'm going to pick here, and I'm going to pick here so we can see what it looks like. So there's my view. And to make this a little bit easier, let me make sure I only have 2 views open. I'm going to show both my plan view and my 3D perspective view. And you can see now I'm going to make a couple changes over here. I'm going to shorten that up. Don't need to have that much. I'm going to close in that one. And you can see on this side, we just had a change to the field of view. This side needs to be wider, so I can move that out. And once again, the field of view has changed. Now, in this particular perspective, here's my target. Here's my far clip plane. Just want you to see what happens if I move that. I'm getting some of my building over here chopped off. So that's what the far clip plane does for you. And of course, as I come down here to our visual styles, and I'm just going to make it shaded so again you can see the change. The one that's the most dangerous to do is actually to whirl around in this view. And let me see if I can do it. There we go. Sometimes you can really throw the view off. And to see the camera again, I'm just clicking on the edge of the view. There you go. And again, make changes. It takes a while to get the right perspective view, the one that you want to create. So one big thing of starting this to make it pretty is finding the right view that you want to do. Oh, and one other thing I did want to do this too. I wanted to come down here. You can see that my eye elevation over here in properties is higher than my target. Let's just see what happens when I change that. There we go. So you're seeing it a little bit more realistic as you're looking straight on it. Well, let's go on back to see more changes, more things that you can do. And let's step on into the graphic display options. So this is a section that I rewrote significantly. I brought all the graphic display options into one place, and so we cover them kind of together because this one impacts that one, or you need to change this or that to build on what you want your design to look like. So this includes sketchy lines. As you can see here in the background, we've got our nice little wavy lines going on a little bit. It also includes things like the new depth queuing. That's a new option that we have in the 2017 version. And there's a few other helpful methods. So now what I want to do is kind of go down the graphic display options and cover bits and pieces of each of those. So first of all, the model display, we have that one right here. First of all, it's set up by what the visual style is. Now, most of the time, you're going to be doing it down here in the view control bar, but this is another place that you can do it. With shaded, you can show edges or not. It comes out, the default is to show edges, but you can see how that looks. Smoothing lines with anti-aliases is going to clean up the edge, so almost the opposite of your sketchy lines that you see here. When you set things transparent, it totally makes everything transparent as opposed to one item in the view. Sometimes if you want to do that, you need to select, like, say, a wall and a door, and then modify the individual, the element view settings. The silhouettes is something I can show you here. There we go. Silhouette is how it's outlined. And you can see on the left here I have a default silhouette and then a silhouette override. And you can specify, how many, what's the level of darkness of these items. Now, what's going to show here is designed by Autodesk. It's not actually something that you can modify where. So like you can see it's the edge of the roof in this particular case. and the edge of this wall over here, but not this wall. It's that tiny little bit of wall there. The next section we have is shadows, and once again, you typically turn shadows on at the view control bar, and I don't have an example of this at the moment, but there's also the option to do ambient shadows. And ambient shadows are more realistic. They're kind of added to corners and other dark areas, so more realistic in what you're seeing, but they make the view much darker. So you might have to make some other adjustments if you're using ambient shadows. That's the only other option with the shadows. You turn them on and off, and they're ambient. Now, Sketchy Lines is something that came out last year, and it can be used in all types of views. You can do plans, elevations, sections, 3D, orthographic, and perspective views. When you put this on, by the way, datum lines such as levels and grids do not go sketchy. Most of the time, if you're using this, you may not even want those in there in the first place, but they don't go sketchy, so just be aware of that. Now, there's two parts to Sketchy Lines when you enable it. You have jitter and extension. And jitter is how wavy the lines are and how many layers of lines there are. 0 is perfectly straight, 10 has multiple layers. The other half is the extension, and you can see that here. It controls the length of the line beyond the end point. And it varies again from 0, no extension, to 10, where the extension is longer. Now, for those of you who don't do any hand drafting or hand drawing, the reason you have these extensions is so that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you have got that corner showing. You know, this is old time, but if you didn't have it quite touching, it would round the surface. It just wouldn't look very good. You don't have to worry about that situation in Revit on a daily basis because you know your endpoints are touching. But the nice part is here you can, if you want to make it look a little bit more hand-drawn, you can set it up with Sketchy Lines. The new choice we have now is depth cueing, and it's mainly for elevations and sections, and it gives you a sense of depth by fading elements into the distance. And you can see this part of the building here is brighter, back here much, much lighter. Depth cueing doesn't work in Planner 3D views, so just be aware of that. And an important thing is it's impacted by your far clipping and your far clip offset. And these are set up in your properties. You can see here, I've got the far clipping can be clipped with a line or not. And then you can set what the offset is, and we'll see that in just a minute when I go into a practice file. And I'll show you a little bit how it works. And this one takes a little bit of time to get used to, and personally I found it easier to modify things in properties than I have in the graphic display options, but you know, you can see and play around with it if you haven't already. The background is another part of the graphic display options, and when you are in elevation views such as this, you have options for no background, sky background, which kind of gives you a default sky, and gradient, which you see here. That's just a fairly simple background. And you can also specify an image. So if you want to have an image that shows, you know, maybe a cityscape behind your building or whatever, you can add that information as well. The last two parts of the graphic display options are the lighting and the photographic exposure. And I'm going to cover both of these a little bit later when we get into our sun studies, because I want to talk a little bit more about setting the sun up and everything before we go there, and then also into the renderings. So let's go ahead and take a look at using the graphic display options. This is our practice to work with this in the book. One view you make sketchy lines, the other view you make more realistic looking. So here we are back in Revit. So I've already made a south entry prelim view. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up. You can see I've actually done some work with it in the Sketchy Lines, this particular view. And I'm going to go into my graphic display options. And here's my Sketchy Lines. Let's just close model display. So you can see here I've got my Sketchy Lines up. I've got my jitter. Make it a little jitterier. I don't have extension on right now, so I can modify that, get a little bit of extension. You can see it kind of especially here on the windows up here. So, and again, as you are making your Revit models pretty, the thing is what's pretty for you. So what might look good for one example may not be exactly what somebody else wants. And so you just need to be aware of that particular situation and, make it look the way you want it to look. Show the part of the building you want it to show. Now, I'm going to copy this particular one. I'm going to duplicate the view. And I'm going to rename it, instead of prelim, I'll say DD for design development. So we're a little bit further along in the process now. And the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and turn my shadows on. Whoops, had them, there we go, they're on. And then I'm going to come up into here, graphic display options, and turn off my Sketchy Lines. So there's the first step. Here's your more normal look of Revit, your straight lines that match at the corners without you having to make it look like they match at the corners. And I'll just show a couple things here. Here's our various choices. That one is shaded. This one is consistent colors. And this one here is realistic. So we can actually apply the various visual styles. It's taking a second to come up. There we go. Now, in this case, I'm not going to worry about a silhouette, but you can see here I could go ahead. Well, let's see what happens when I do wide lines. I actually haven't tried it. Yeah, I'm not sure much is showing up in this particular view. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. But one thing I do want to show is a bit more shadows. So I already turned on the cast shadows at the view control bar, but now I'm going to show ambient shadows. So look quick, or right now there's no ambient shadows, and now there are ambient shadows. Can you see the difference? It's very tight. So no ambient shadows, now we have them. And again, the more complex your building is, the more shadows that you would see. The one that I noticed the most happening down here, as you can see at the base of the wall, there's a little bit more of the shadows happening in this particular case. But by the way, when you do put on things like ambient shadows, it does take up more space in your computer program as well. So it might slow things down. And if you don't need shadows, turn them off as well, because they can be pretty intense as well. Well, let me take you into depth queuing here. I'm going to show the depth. Right now you can see everything is pretty much set. All it did at this particular case was the shade got a little bit lighter. Now I'm going to go out of here for a minute and into my properties and get to the right place. Oh, here it is, bar clipping. And I'm going to clip, so right now you see there's no clip. I'm going to do my clip with line, though this one doesn't matter really which one you do because it's just kind of a head straight on. And click OK. Now we've got a problem. The only thing that's showing now is our topo surface down here. There we go. Topography, which means our clip plane is not deep enough. So what I need to come back here now is change my clip plane, the offset. So I'm going to set it to 100. We got a little bit, but can you see how far it is away? So it's all considered kind of far away. what happens when I go to 150, a little bit darker, 200. Okay, so you're starting to see a little bit of the depth changing there when I put on my FAR clipping and set the offset. Now, I am actually typing GD, and that is a shortcut to get into the graphic display options. So instead of having to go down to the view control bar every time. Now I'll check out my depth queuing, and let's see what happens if I change my fade start end location and set it a little bit further off. And like once again, there are some algorithms that I can't explain to you because I am not that mathematically inclined. But you can modify, you know, where you see these various things. You can change how heavy or light the fading is and how much you see near to far. So in this particular case, we don't have a very deep building, and you're not going to see a ton of changes. But if I had, say, another building behind this and modified it, the depth queuing would be a very, very powerful tool. Like I said, I'm going to skip lighting and photographic exposure for a second, but I do want to just show you a background. So here is the sky, and this might be too dark, and for my cases, I do print training guides as well as the ones online. So this would be a little bit dark for me to print. Here's my gradient, and here's my image option. And I can customize the image, and I just remembered I didn't put an image into my my area where I can get to this, so sorry about that. I'm not going to show you an image at the moment. But anyway, you can change all those things. So let's get it to the sky. Now I'm going to check and see how many things I have open. Let's go ahead and close a few of these. I don't need my floor plan. I don't need my 3D view, but I am now going to window tile and zoom all. That was a WT and a ZA. And now you can see the two versions of this building, one much more sketchy, preliminary, one we're getting ready to be a little bit further into design development. Now, one other thing we do in this practice that I'm not going to do now is set it up so you have a 3D view that looks like an elevation. And the one reason I like to show that is because your depth of all these windows right now, they're not see-through. You can't see these. And but if you want to have that and you want to do more rendering level things, well, actually, you know what? Let me just do it. It's not going to hurt. Here's a 3D view. I'm going to right-click on my view cube over here, orient to view, elevations, and I'm selecting that elevation I just did. And you can see here it zooms in, and it's giving me that exact same choice right there, or that exact same view. And you can see right away more information. You've got railings behind here. Here's my realistic color scheme. So now you can see a little bit more of that. Here's my shadows that are on. That's getting a little dark in this particular case, so we won't worry about the shadows at the moment. But I want you to notice this cool thing. See this room right here? There are lights on in this room. This room up here, no lights are on. So you can even see the difference between a room that's lighted and a room that's not. And so once again, another level of things that you can do with this 3D view. And by the way, one other thing that's really cool about this, you can not just do realistic, but you can do a ray trace. And ray trace is almost rendering, but you can actually move around in the rendering. So here's your rendered view. You can see a lot more stuff is happening. We do have our shadows coming in automatically through the rendering in this case. And if I do a little bit of shift and scroll my mouse button, you see we're actually in a 3D view, because in this case, you can't do the ray trace in a 2D view. And you can modify it around. And one other thing that's important here for you to know, I'm just going to go back to Hidden Line for a second. When you use that Orient to View, it actually creates a section box. And this, again, is another thing for your 3D views. It can be very, very powerful. You can set up a section box so it shows just part of what you want to see. For example, if you want to show the interior. There we go. Let's see. I have no idea what this is going to look like when it's shaded. Ah, very red carpet. But you can see, you're now seeing the interiors of view, and you can add shadows, do other things. Very powerful tool, the section boxes. That was an additional little thing I hadn't planned to show you, but there you go. Well, as you could see when we dealt with the shadows, that we didn't necessarily have them in the right place. So what we need to do is actually make sure the sun is in the right place. And this is, we can turn on our shadows, but we also can set the sun path. But first, before you do that, you need to make sure you have your true north set. Not every, when you open up a standard Revit template, there's no north angle set. And so what you need to be able to do is set it. And typically what you want to do, first of all, is have a view that shows your true north orientation that's separate from the view that shows your standard. And you can see here you can change the orientation of a view to true north. And I will show you in just a minute how you do actually set up that, that true north. The other thing that you need to set up is your location. And so the location, you can use your default city list. You can choose from that. If you have exact latitude and longitude, you can put that in. If you're using daylight savings time, of course, all these different things. Then you can also put in your project address. This is using the Internet Mapping Service. So it really doesn't matter. That's all you're doing right there is you're choosing between those two. So let's set up our model here with the right information. I am going to, let's see. To get rid of the 3D view, that's a way I don't want it to do, I'm naming it, and then I can now, so I just named it down there. So this view is just named X. And now if I want to do a default 3D view, it comes back to the true default. So that's a nice little trick if you have got a view that you don't want to necessarily use, but you can get back to your 3D view easily. So first of all, I'm going to come into my Manage tab. Oh, wait a minute. You know what, first, let me go ahead and do this first. I'm going to duplicate the view. So here's level 1 copy. Let me redo that. And I'm going to say this is level 1 true north. At the moment, the orientation is project north, and I'm going to change this view to true north and apply it. Nothing happens because we haven't actually changed the north. The north is done in the Manage tab and the location coordinates. Oh, I always picked the wrong one, this one, the position, rotate true north. So what I want to do is select rotate true north, and I have the little rotation angle here you can see on the screen, very similar to plain old rotate. I can also type in an angle. I can be very precise, and because you really need to when you get your site in a line, you want to know where all these various things are. And right now I'm just going to say 21 degrees. And there we go. We have the orientation of our building that would actually be it on the site. And this is going to impact our sun. The other thing we want to do is select the location. This is also in the Manage tab. There's the location button you can see up here. And you can use the Internet Mapping Service or I'm going to do the default city list. And I am actually in Richmond, Virginia. So I'm going to set this here. All right, so that's set. Again, it's like you didn't really see anything happen, but let's go on back to our 3D view and see how this impacts what we're doing. So I'm going to turn on shadows, and I'm going to turn on the sun path. Let me just show you this on this section. So what I'm getting ready to do is turn on the sun path, and there's the various parts of the sun path that you can see here. It shows you when sunrise is, it shows you when sunset is, and you can actually go in there and, I don't know if you can see the numbers right there. It'll show you the very day you've selected. There's the total sun area is this path right here, all the white. The sun path, the location of the sun, is this right here. Now, the other part of the sun, and this is just, hopefully our little video will work right now, the analemma, or analemma, depending on how you want to pronounce it, is where the sun is in the same hour at different days throughout the year. And just for something kind of fun, I'd like to show you the solar analemma over Edmonton, Alberta. And so I'm going to, Karine, if something isn't working, please let me know.
Will do.
This is Vivaldi's Four Seasons, and we are actually starting in the summer. So this is summertime. You can see it where the place, the sun is up there in the sky. So here we are. This is about the fall equinox. So we're now into the fall. And this particular person decides to change to the winter before we hit the winter solstice. And Edmonton, there we go, winter solstice, is in the north. Their winter is very long. Very long winter. But now we're to spring. And there's your analemma. And we want to thank the person who made this, Lucia Vanzella. Thank you, Lucia. So that was just fun. I hope you enjoyed it. I've always loved the Four Seasons. So we want to now take a look at how this looks and what it's going to do in our solar studies. And so we're coming in now to set up the sun settings. And here we are back in Revit. Our sun path is off right now. We're going to turn it on. I do want to use the specified location. And now you can see here's our sun. Let me see what happens. Let's do shaded. That's a little bit helpful. Shadows are on. All right. So now when you're seeing this, the point, you can choose where you want to be. So with the sun, you can actually change the location of the sun. See if it's going to give me some more shadows here. Whoops. You can choose what time of year it is. There's right now it's 6/8 of 2016. But let's see what happens when we get into the fall. Let's see. There we go. You can see the location of the sun has changed significantly. And in this case, I'm getting some shadows coming around the back. So you can really modify, what's going on with your shadows and that information. What you can do too is be more precise, and that's working in your sun settings. Now, I'm not going to have time today to go over how to create the solar studies, but I do want to look at our lighting. So in the lighting right here, we can actually say, this is generic, so without worrying about exactly where we are, you can see behind us the sunlight's coming from the top right, and we're getting some more shadows on the building. And then if I want to have it coming from the top left, I'm getting shadows in a different way. But the other part you want to do is like the in-session lighting, and it's remembering the other information. Now, one thing I do want to show you here before I go back to my slideshow, this place right here, ground plane at level, it's going to show just a straight ground plane. So if you don't have a topo surface, you would set this at a specific level. If you turn this off, it's actually going to go to the topo surface itself. So you can see it really changed a lot in that particular case. So we actually are using the topo surface in this particular example here. And that's where you see here the ground plane at the level, which is just kind of out into nowhere, and this one's actually on the site. And here's the sun studies, as I mentioned. And I've actually already come up to here. In our practice in the book, you will actually go through all the, how to make a still study and a more active one. And so this practice actually includes making a variety of sun studies. But let's go on now to producing some basic renderings. And I can promise you I'm not getting you to this point yet, but this is just a beautiful building. This is one that's by Burke Hogan Mills Architects down in Florida, and they were kind enough to let us use their model, their Revit model, and some of the things that we do. So anytime you see this particular building, that is the Revit model originally designed by Burke Hogan Mills. So the things to remember, though, when you are producing basic renderings is that, of course, you need to pick the 3D view. You can see this particular one is a perspective. You want to make sure that your materials are applied to the model elements. And I think you can probably see here, this looks like kind of a corrugated metal roof. Here we've got something bright blue on the sunscreen, the shade over the front door. So you're using your particular materials. You want to turn on shadows because that's going to give you some help to, as you're producing your rendering. The rendering itself will put the shadows in, but as you're trying to get everything set up, you can go ahead and get your shadows. You will need to set your sun settings, especially for an exterior view like this. Also, that you can add lights. And lights in Revit are powerful. They actually have light in them. And you can do anything from kind of some of the default lighting that is available to very specific lighting. You can set up your lighting families with, and I forget the term right off the bat, but ISE or something like that. That will show the exact bulb, what kind of bulb it is and how much it is. In the lighting, and then you will get very, very accurate lighting within your model. Of course, applying a background is helpful. This one looks like it's just a plain sky. And then you start adding rich photographic content. Those are components such as plants, people, and as you can see here, cars. So they've got nice little, Florida-based type of trees, and we have some cars here to show you how this is laid out. Oh, by the way, I just saw this when I was looking at it. Do you see right in there? A bicycle. Somebody bikes to work. Another thing before I go on to bringing up the actual rendering dialog box, in 2017, all the rendering in Autodesk Revit is using Autodesk Ray Tracer. It used to be you could choose a separate engine, so now there's just one engine that you can use, and it accurately represents the real-world materials by calculating its light and its impact on the materials as accurately as possible. So it's a very, very powerful engine. And if you are upgrading a model from previous versions and you've used Mental Ray, which was the previous one, you could use that as well, those settings will be automatically mapped to the appropriate Ray Tracer settings. So you don't have to worry too much if you started working on a rendering in 2016 and you move into 17. Most likely everything will be just fine. So in this section, just because of our time, all I want to do is really go through a few things in the rendering dialog box. And of course, you need to be in a view that you can render, and then you can set up your rendering, and I'll go through each of these. One thing to remember is when you start with the lowest amount of rendering that you can see enough, and also render a region, and that's what you're seeing over here. This is the area of a larger view that's going to be rendered, and in this particular case, it's what comes out automatically when you choose this region button here. It automatically puts a box in, so don't try to, I always try to draw one, and it doesn't work. So watch out, find the box, and then you can use the little controls here and change it around to show the view that you want to do. Rendering time, it's going to differ according to the setting of the quality and the amount of information that the whole process needs to work on. And you can see in this case, this is a fairly simple one, elapsed time, well, 0.8 minutes, I think. I'm not even sure, that might be 8 minutes. Anyway, there's not a ton of time in this particular rendering. So let's take a quick look through our rendering settings. The first one you want to choose is the quality, and as I mentioned, start with draft, just so you're making sure that your everything you want is in the right place. There's the right kind of lighting, your materials are correct, that sort of information. So just do that pretty quickly. There are preset choices, and you can also use custom. And then if you have a custom, it'll be for this view, and you can edit it. One new thing that's in 2017 is all of that information is saved with the properties of the view. Your output settings, you can see here, you can either go to the screen or a printer. And once again, just depends on what it is you want to do. And that's how you said, if you're doing printer, how many dots per inch, and that's your, very much your setting as well. In the lighting dialog box, it is similar to what is in the lighting one for the sun studies, and you can set your scheme. This one says just interior or sun only. That will be a very dark view unless you're in a very sunny room. But you can do interior and artificial lights. Again, you set up what day it is, and it's going to reference back to your location. This artificial lights that isn't highlighted right here, we cover this pretty thoroughly in the training guide about how to make sure you have the lights in the right place and selecting which lights actually are rendered, because you may have a building with thousands of lights. You don't want those lights to be rendered or Revit to have to calculate the information about that. So you can limit the number of lights that are included in a part of the Revit view. The background here is a little different from the ones that you do through just a sun study. The cloud cover in this particular area is going to impact how much light is in it. So you have no clouds, it'll be brighter. If you have it very cloudy, you're going to have a very dark day, that sort of thing. So the amount of haze you can add in as well with these. You can specify just a blank color. That you can choose your own image, and once again you can set up images that would be either sky or the background of the buildings around you or whatever you need there. The transparent option that you can see right down here is a new one in 2017, and it allows you to create a PNG file or a TIFF file that leaves the background transparent. And that might be something you want to use if you want to be putting your building in a much larger photographic thing. You take it into Photoshop, and your building would be in there and it would be set up transparent. Very cool. The last part of this is the adjust exposure, and this adjusting the exposure is similar to our doing that in the sun study as well. A lot of times when you get the original rendering, like we have here on the left here, it'll come out really dark. This, by the way, is not a very intense rendering, as you can probably see on the screen, probably just a default version. But it is a little too dark. You can come into your exposure control and modify it. So the choices are here. You can do your values. You can say how the highlights act, your midtones, your shadows. What is it you want to put out and make it, making your, in this case, very pretty. You really want this to look as realistic as possible, and there's a lot of options that you can do for that. So once again, let's just switch back to Revit itself and very, very quickly produce a basic rendering. We do want to have some time for any questions. Well, I'm going to come in here to my interior perspective. This is one that you actually ultimately will put in, all sorts of fun things like trees and people and decals. Decals, by the way, is one I added this year. It's been around for a while, but we didn't actually have it in our training guide, and we do now. So I'm coming down here. First of all, I can check it all out with ray trace. This is helpful. So I just wanted to show you this really quick first, because we're going to get a sense of our rendering. Here we go. And you can see it is too dark. Things aren't really showing for us. So I'm going to close that and then go into render. So here's my show rendering dialog box down here. And it popped up on the other screen. There we go. I'm going to do a region, and there's the box right there. As I say, it automatically comes up. And let's see, we'll just pull it down a little bit smaller. Let's get some height. And once again, you can choose your information. I'm going to go to the screen right now. I am going to come in here, and I want to say sun and artificial. And I am right now going to just use my in-session lighting and see how that does. I'm going to go with few clouds, because in this case it tends to be kind of dark. And then I'm going to pick render. My process box came up on the other screen too, so sorry I can't show you that at the moment. And now it's not responding. There we go. So it's about 45% complete. There we go, and you can see it's very dark. So I'm going to come in here and adjust my exposure. And we're seeing a little bit more. In this case, I think what I really need to do is get my light fixtures right. These are kind of the default lights in here, and I don't think that they're giving me a very good, clean view. There we go. You can start seeing some of the cool stuff that rendering, even at a very basic draft level, you can start to see things that what it'll look like. There we go. So instead of taking up the rest of the time and doing a custom or best rendering, this is where I'm going to stop for our rendering choices. I will render it one more time, draft it, the full thing, as I talk. I am glad to take some questions, so if you want to start putting questions in. But I also want to tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing next. There's our rendering, it's coming up. Our training guides that are available, and then I'll have Karine tell you a little bit more, and then we'll answer some questions. So, hey, that's not bad for a first rendering. So, upcoming, we are in what we have available right now. These are our architecture building design training guides that are available. All of our fundamentals guides are ready. So Revit Architecture, Revit MEP, Revit Structure, they're both available in Imperial and Metric. The Conceptual Design and Visualization book that this is taken from will be out in June. So we've got a few more weeks, right? I'm just about finished with that, and we'll be getting that out in a bit. And we're also going to have our BIM Management, the Template and Family Creation book coming out in June. And then after that, we just start rolling out the rest of them. Mm-hmm. So, Karine, do you want to go ahead and talk about?
If you want to show the next slide, Martha, I just really quickly wanted to go over with everyone the different types of learning materials we have for these books. So, most people are familiar with our printed student guide that we call it, so that if you order that, it comes spiral bound, which is nice, and printed. We have that available on our e-store, and plus we also now are selling a lot of our books on Amazon.com. So, depending on where you're shipping it to, or sometimes Amazon puts on sales that, we give them one price and they could put a sale on. Unfortunately, they don't tell us, or I would be sure to pass that on to everyone. But you could get qualified for free shipping on there, and it's always a great place to check to see if the books do happen to be on sale from Amazon. So they're available that way. If you prefer to learn on your computer or device, we've got ebooks and video-enhanced ebooks. We have e-learning bundles and video-enhanced e-learning bundles, buying 3 or 4 courses at once and saving a bit of money that way and learning online. We have instructor tools, so if you are tasked with teaching the class, these are really helpful, as I'm sure Martha can attest to. It really, gives you timing suggestions for all parts of the book, for doing the exercises and how much time you should spend on, a particular chapter. And of course, there's answers in there as well to the review questions. And then we have some digital site licenses. So if you are looking for larger volumes and need, more than 50 books, at a time for a title or spread it over a period, definitely contact our sales team, and they can get you some good pricing for that. And that gives you the opportunity to print the material yourself. And then
just real quick, by the way, for the conceptual design and visualization, I am going to have slides that will be coming with the instructor tools this year. So that's a new thing that we haven't had before for this one, but you just saw a bunch of those slides that will be in the instructor tools if you want that.
That's great. So it's a PowerPoint presentation you're providing them with, right? So they can
right.
Show perfect. So you don't have to do any kind of prep work if you're teaching the class. It's all done for you. That's great.
Right.
And then lastly, just ways to contact us, ways to purchase. Again, I mentioned Amazon.com, or we have our ASCENT We'll leave the slide up if you have any questions you can think of after. You can email us with feedback@ascented.com with either questions about our courseware or this particular book, or if you've got ideas for future webcasts or future training guides that you would like ASCENT to develop, please let us know. That would be great. I'd love to hear from you.